Welcome, Anuradha ji. Are you there?
Yes, Dimple. Namaste.
Yes, namaste. Wonderful. I can see you and I can see why you are talking about books and reviews. This is so wonderful to see. I mean, I'm sure you must have thousands and thousands of books.
Not as many as I would like to have, but yeah, some.
We can wait for a minute or two and then it will be all yours. People will
Yes.
keep coming both, but I'm around, so and I like reading, so I might have many questions for you. But I guess you will have the Q&A towards the end, so it should not be a problem.
Okay, sure.
Thank you so much for doing it, Aman, for Indic Academy. We've read your reviews. I mean, everybody, I'm sure people I know about your work, your blogging and stuff. So I'm sure you're gonna tell us all about it. So let me just give the stage to you. Over to you, Anuji.
Dimple, I hope that some people join me for doing reviews because, as we know, that the publishing industry is growing in India. So more and more people would need recommendations. More and more people would need help in choosing the next book to read because people don't read too many books. They read like maybe one book a month, which is also more than enough. So I'm hoping that some people join in and we will create a community of book reviewers.
Absolutely.
So we'll wait for a couple of more seconds, couple of more minutes if somebody joins in.
And you could at least begin with your introduction piece.
Um, I'll wait for 5 minutes and see if somebody joins in. Okay. In the
Yes.
meantime, if you have any questions, I can answer them.
Have you been a reviewer and a blogger all your life? How did you step into this?
So I've been a reader all my life. I've been a reader as far as I can remember. I used to spend all my pocket money on books. Uh, Everything I could save, I would spend on books. So I've been a
Wow.
reader all my life. Reviewing happened when I started blogging. I wanted to write about my reflections on books. So I still don't call them reviews per se. I call them my reflections on the books I read. But since I've been doing it consistently, it's become a huge repository of 600 plus books that I've reviewed.
Wow. So when did you exactly start reviewing? Like which year?
2004.
Oh my God.
Yeah, September 2004 is when I posted the first review of, I think, Herman Hesse's which was a very symbolic book because it's all about exploration in life and it's all about taking different paths to reaching where you want to reach.
So your
So
reviewing has just hit adolescence, 13 years.
13 years, yes, just hit because in fact it hit last week. It's only
Wow.
26 September. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's one of
So,
the probably one of the oldest blogs in India.
wow.
Yeah.
But then, like, you've had a professional career also. Is it to do with writing or?
No, no, no. I was into IT industry software.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I did all kind of management stuff from the cabin, which people do. Blogging happened. I stepped out to do things on my own, and blogging took over. So I really didn't plan it this way, but it happened. And I still continue to do. At least the book reviews are absolutely non-commercial. So I still read what I want to read, and I review what I want to review.
Superb. And the blogging bit, how do you manage? Like, if you're travel blogging, so you are traveling, right? So how do you
Right.
balance both?
So when I'm traveling, I don't read, I just absorb travels. And when I'm not traveling, when I'm at home, I read a lot. Or when I'm waiting at the airports, I read a lot. So all the gaps where you're waiting or you're running around gets filled with books. And
how are you?
I have a huge list of books that I have to read before I die. I have a huge list.
But how are you able to, juggle between the two? When you said that there are gaps when you read, so how are you able to focus? So do you decide, okay, when I'm traveling, I might read this particular genre because it is not so difficult to take in if there's a book
Yeah,
on philosophy?
I try to read the lighter books while I'm traveling. So you can, sit at a airport in the middle of the crowd and still read it, or in a flight or something. At home, I read my heavier books. Yeah, the heavier books I usually read it.
And when if you are, say, reading in between the gaps, as you call those, and maybe a lighter genre, so do you make notes? Are you reading to review, or are you reading to absorb? I'm sorry, it's a very different question, but
No, so I read to absorb for sure, and that's how I have read all my life. But since the time I've started reviewing, obviously somewhere you read something and you feel okay, this can go into the review or this is something. So I make a note of that. I do make a note of that, or if there's a thought that it invokes, then I make take notes, and so that when I'm reviewing, I can go back to that and review easily.
and what is the average time that you take to read? So it's like per page, per word. How would you time your reading?
It really depends, There are, so if you are reading, let's say, a light-hearted fiction, you just read it in a jiffy. You don't really need to go back forth. But if you're reading a philosophy book, you sometimes have to read the same thing 10 times before you understand. So it depends on the genre of the book and depends on my knowledge of that book, of that subject. If I know the subject well, I can read faster. If I don't know the subject, then it takes a lot longer.
Thank you so much for indulging me, Anuradha ji. I think we have people joining in, and now it is all yours. Feel free to structure
Okay,
it as you wish.
okay, great. So, hello everybody who's joined us. Okay, so I'm going to take about 30 minutes to talk about book reviews, how to write a book review, or how to assess a book so that you can recommend it to somebody else, or somebody can pick up the book or not pick up the book based on your recommendation. So I'm going to take about 30 minutes to talk about it, and after that, you can ask me any questions that you have, either on books, book reviews, blogging, or books blogging, or anything that you think I can answer. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So keep indulging me by saying something so that I know you guys are around.
I would just request all the participants to kindly mute their microphone if they are not asking a question.
Okay. Okay. So let me begin by saying, what is a book review? So as a reader, there are all kinds of readers. There are readers who mostly read to entertain themselves, who read to, fill in the gaps, time pass, or anything. There are readers who read to gain knowledge. There are readers who would read and then reflect and build on what they are reading. So depends on what kind of reader you are, and most of us are all these kinds of readers at different points in time. Depends on what we are reading and what we are doing. Now, what is a book review, or where do the author and reader meet? Uh, you know, so when you're reading a book, there are three elements in play. One is the author, one is you, the reader, and the third is the subject of the book. So the intersection of these three, the author, the reader, and the subject, the intersection of these three is where all three of you meet and exchange some energy, exchange some ideas, some energy, some thoughts, and that's where every reader. That's why every reader reads a book differently. No two readers will read the same book the same way. Even twins might read it differently because we meet the author at the intersection of our experiences, what we have seen, what we have experienced in life, and we meet at meet at an intersection with the author based on what he has shared in the book. The process of reading involves two things. One is absorbing and one is reflecting. One is when you're reading the book, you're trying to absorb as much as possible of whatever the author is trying to tell us. And then when you close the book down, you reflect as to what the book has done to you. Has it helped you, not helped you? And, putting together these thoughts is in the form of a write-up which others can read as a book review. It's as simple as that. Okay. So since reader is equally important in the process of reading, it's important that you know yourself as a reader. What kind of books do you like to read? What are the genres that you prefer to read? What kind of ideologies that you like to read? So it's important that you know. You may experiment with a lot of genres, but it's important that you know what kind of things you like, what are your preferences, because that will also align you with a lot of authors and a lot of reviewers. Just like movie reviewers, every book reader also have their favorite reviewers with whom their tastes match. Okay. So I'll start with elements of book review. What are the typical elements of a book review? Okay. So let me first talk about the right brain part of the review. So as soon as you finish reading a book and you close the book, you ask yourself a few questions, very simple questions. First of all, how has the book left me? What is the emotion that the book is leaving me with? Let me share you an example. When I read Rahul Pandita's Our Moon Has Blood Clots, it left me extremely sad. I couldn't eat my food for next 2-3 days. It was a brilliant book, but it left me extremely sad. Okay? Similarly, when you read a children's book, it leaves you in a slightly childlike emotion. It leaves you with a nostalgia. So first of all, ask yourself, what emotion is this book leaving me with? Am I happy? Am I disgusted? Am I thrilled? Am I thinking? What am I doing? So what impact has this book left on me? Second question you can ask yourself is that, has this book changed anything in my mind? Has it made me think about a subject differently? Has it given me a new window to look at a subject? Has it enhanced my knowledge? Has it added to what I already knew? Does it reinforce what I think about a subject, or is it, does it contradict with what I think? And there may be a point of view there. So think about what impact it leaves you. Does it leave you enriched? Does it leave you thinking? Does it leave you, figuring out whether the whatever author is saying is right or wrong or whatever, what impact it has on your mind or on your long-term mind. For example, I'll tell you, many years ago, I had read this book called Meera and the Mahatma by Sudhir Kakar. Until then, whatever I knew about Mahatma Gandhi was whatever was written in our school textbooks, which was all great. Okay, so this was the first book which gave me an insider's insight into the ashram of Mahatma Gandhi, and I started questioning a lot of things. And that questioning continues even today after many years. Okay, so the impact that book had on me was that my entire thought process was changed from what I had learned in a school over ages. It started impacting my thought process. It has changed my thought process forever. Okay, so there are some books which will have that kind of an impact, but every book will have some impact on your thought process, good or bad. Okay. The third question you should ask is, what did you like about the book and what did you not like about the book? So sometimes we close the book and we say, what a beautiful language, what a way of words this author has. Or sometimes we say, story was nice, but I wish the author had better language. So what did you like and what did you not like about the book? Then you should ask yourself, what are the strengths of this book and what are the weaknesses of this book? Okay? And finally, you should ask, would you recommend this book to a friend? A simple yes and no, or maybe kind of a question. And if you have these 4 5 questions answered, then you have the basic book review material ready with you, and you know the impact, your relationship with that book. You know whether you liked it, whether you liked it or not, whether you would recommend it or not, or whether, at a basic level. So this is the right way. Without thinking, without letting your mind analyze anything, without letting your logical brain get into it, you just say, I finished reading this book and this is what I feel about this book. So if you have these 4 5 points sorted out in your mind, you basically know what you want to say in the book. And then when you sit down to write a review, you can basically look at 3 or 4 points, 3 or 4 elements, basic elements. There are a million elements that you can go into, but I'm going to talk about 4 or 5 elements that you can primarily look at while you're doing a book review. And this is with your logical brain on. Okay, so this is when you can put your analytical okay. So I will start with this one, which is the purpose of the book. Very important. What is the purpose of the book? Why is author writing a book? Now for fiction writers, every fiction writer has a story to say. It's based in something. Its story may have its base in an incident that has impacted them, or something in life that they have observed, and that they feel they need to write a story about, or they need to weave it into a story and present to the world, a point of view. But for non-fiction writers, the purpose of the book is a lot of people write books to establish themselves as writers, as an expert. So they are you able to hear me? Hello? Can somebody
Yes,
confirm if
we can.
okay?
Yes,
So
I can.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So so for the non-fiction writers, you need to figure out, why are they writing this book? Are they trying to establish themselves as experts, or do they have a body of work which they need to present? They need to document and present to the world. Are they trying to do they have something compelling to tell to the world which they are trying to tell? What are they trying to present? A point of view which may not have been presented earlier? Are they who's their intended audience? The second thing you need to ask is, who's the intended audience? Again, for fiction, it's pretty simple. Most fiction writers know very clearly their audience, but for non-fiction writers, you need to figure out what is their intended audience, because non-fiction books are primarily on a subject matter, and there are different levels of readers for those subjects. There are basic, intermediate, advanced readers, because it also how you will read the book depends on what is your level of expertise on that subject. So for example, if there's a book on, let's say, leadership skills, now unless you are a leader, you are in a leadership position, you may not understand a lot of jargon mentioned in that book. But if you are in that position, then a base level book may not appeal to you. Okay, so it's important to understand for whom the book has been written. And for example, I was just reading a book, compilation of essays on Hinduism. Now, most of these essays have been written by foreigners, and they are intended for foreigners. So when I read it as a practicing Hindu Indian, I get a very different view of how they look at my culture. But if you don't understand that it is not written for you, your review would be different. So if you understand that it is written by somebody for somebody, which is not you, you read it with that angle. You read it from the perspective of probably the intended audience. Okay. So end of the book, when you've read the book, you should be able to see if the author was successful in fulfilling the purpose for the intended audience. Uh, any questions? Uh, okay, so I'll move on. So we can look at the author details. You can do a little bit of research on the author, who the author is, uh, what is their knowledge, what is their level of authority on the subject they are talking about, what is the level of research they do, what is the purpose of the book, and what is their style. Is it a formal style of writing? Is it an informal style of writing? Or is it an academic style of writing? Yeah. Uh, then of course you have to see the content of the book. What is the level of detail? An important thing that I look for in every book is the book offering me something new. You know, a lot of books are written. In fact, I remember I had a conversation a long time back with somebody, a very senior journalist who used to review books, and he said, writing a book is very simple. You just pick up 10 books on the subject and you can write the 11th book. Uh, and now maybe this is right, maybe. But what I look for is the author adding something new. It has to be either a new point of view or new knowledge or something new. Every book should add to the overall knowledge base of the world. So, what is it the new? It could be the style which is new. It could be the presentation which is new. It could be a new idea or a new way to look at the same thing. But something new has to be there in every book, be it fiction or non-fiction, right? Um, then comes the language. Now, this is very interesting because in a fiction, uh, language can create the environment. For example, when you are, let's say, reading a historical fiction. And now, historical fiction is something that takes you in a different era. It takes you in a different time and space. To go there as a reader, and especially when you're using a language which is not really the native language of that time and space, uh, uh, very few authors have the skill to port you into that time and space using their language. Very few authors can do that. So I remember one of the authors I read had, in a historical fiction or in a mythological fiction rather, had used management jargon. While using saying that, let's say, um, uh, uh, Krishna was weighing options, instead of that saying he was running analytics in his mind. Uh, Now, the moment you say he was running analytics in his mind, your mind is split between two different eras, and it kind of breaks the narrative continuity, the rhythm of the book. So for me, the language becomes very important, and also the language uh, should belong to the era that you're talking about. So if you're writing a college fiction, then it's okay to use, let's say, any cuss words, maybe. I don't approve of them, but maybe it's okay. But if you put them in, let's say, a science fiction or a historical fiction, they just don't fit in. Okay? So look at it. There are a couple of authors who do it beautifully. I just read a book called The Boy from Patliputra uh, uh, by Rahul Mitra, and he has recreated the era of Chanakya by just intelligently using few words, very few words. By intelligently using, he has recreated that era for the reader very beautifully while writing in English. So that important. And then you can look at what is the style. Is it the rhythmic style of writing? Is it lyrical? Is it a matter of fact kind of style? Is it colloquial? Is it classical? Is it simple? In general, as of today, it's always advisable to use the very simple language. Okay? The quality of language, you can look at coherence. I am lately coming across a lot of books where the language is not coherent. It gives me a feeling as if four different authors have written this book. Sometimes that is true. The writing is outsourced, but sometimes the author writes in different in different time and space, different parts of the book, and then they forget to do the homework of homogenizing the language, which is very disturbing for a reader. It doesn't, it takes the reader in and out of uh, boxes, and it's like presenting the book in a box, in different boxes where the boxes don't talk to each other. Okay? Then look at, is the language used uh, relevant for the intended audience? Now you may like the language, but the intended audience may not. The intended audience um, may just not connect with that language. So for example, there is a large section of teenagers and young adults who read Chetan Bhagat. If you give them anything more complex than what the kind of language he uses, they will probably not read or never read. Okay, so for him, that language level works. Okay, so for his intended audience, that language level works. Okay, so look at, is it suitable for? So when you're reviewing, you're not reviewing for yourself. So you can say that for me, it works, but of readers would potentially enjoy this reading. Okay. Then you can look at whether it's original or translation. Translated books, reviewing translated books is very difficult if you've not read the original. But still, if you read about 30, 40 translations, you'll be able to make out the quality of translation. You'll be able to figure out if the translation does justice to the original work or not, or it manages to convey what the original work wanted to convey, right? Any questions till now? I'm finding this a monologue.
We are all completely listening to you, all ears.
Okay, okay, okay. So for after language, you can look at editing. And now editing is something lately I have a lot of issues with. Most editors are not spending any time on editing the books. So that's where actually a lot of language incoherence comes from. A lot of grammatical errors come from, a lot of spelling errors come from. The structuring of the book sometimes is left. I see a trend where the book starts on a very high note and then it suddenly falls down. Suddenly towards the end, as if the author and the editor are not expecting you to read beyond first couple of chapters. So structure of the book. So anything that has not to do with the base content is something that comes under editing. Language, grammar, spelling, structures, table of contents, references, appendix, anything, reading lists, So see how well that has been done. A lot of times I've seen, even with very celebrated authors, the editing is not that great. And sometimes editing is so good. In fact, editing you notice only when it is bad. If it is good, it becomes invisible. You just don't notice it. So if you don't notice editing errors in a book, that means the editing work has been done well. Okay. Another thing that I look for in books is rasa. Now I don't know if there's an English equivalent of that, but it's the joy that it gives you. The ras. So it is one of those 9 navrasas that we have. And every book must have some rasa. It's sometimes difficult to put it in a non-fiction book because especially when you're writing about technical subjects or management subjects or science subjects, it can get a little difficult to put rasa in that, but I know people who have done that successfully, even in those dry subjects. But in most other subjects, it's always good to bring out rasa because that keeps the reader glued to the book. That gives the reader that curiosity to turn the page and figure out what next now. And so this is something that most thrill writers or most fiction writers are good at, but in non-fiction it becomes a challenge at times, but there are people who do it. So I look for at least 1 or 2 prominent rasa that every book should have. So for example, I was reading this autobiography of Ahilyabai Holkar, which is originally written in Marathi. I read it in English, and even in English, the translator could bring out that whole, that shant ras, that veer ras out of uh, in the whole story of a woman who belongs to a nomadic tribe to somebody who goes on to rule a substantial part of India for the longest time. So so that this veer ras or any ras for that matter is something that keeps you clued, and this is something which I find very easily in a lot of Indian literature, which is written in Indian languages. In Hindi literature, I definitely find it a lot. In Marathi, I find it a lot. Bengali, I find it a lot. I've not read too much of other literature, but I find it a lot. But in English, especially in non-fiction, it's an effort to put it there. So if somebody can bring that in, need to kind of highlight it and notice it and appreciate it. So now let's come to the core of the books, which is inner fiction. It is the characters, how well the characters are etched out, how the plot is, what is the theme of the book, what is the setting, what are the high points, and finally what is the emotion. At least every story has an emotion or a theme or a character. So, you can individually look at each of these and assess these, characters. How well are these characters etched out? How relatable are these characters? Can be related to, can you think of somebody when you look at that character in your life? How is the plot? Have you seen something similar somewhere? Is it something new, or is it something the same thing but told in a nice way or put in a different perspective? Again, what is the setting? And it's the whole story you can assess. In a non-fiction, and listen to this carefully, because these are the spectrum is very wide when it comes to non-fiction. So in a non-fiction, look for accuracy. First of all, how accurate is the book? Is whatever it is saying, is there a basis for wherever there are facts that are mentioned? And you know your home for using that inaccuracy uh, contest something that accuracy is very important. Look for style. What kind of writing is it? Is it narrative? Is it hello? Hello.
Anuradha, we seem to have lost you. We can't hear you.
Wait. I can hear you, so you should be able to hear
Yes,
me.
now you're back. Now you're back.
Okay. So let me just look at the screen. Where is it? I can't see the screen. Mm, okay. So where was I? Where did you lose me?
On the narrative bit.
Okay, so author can have different styles of writing. A non-fiction writer also, it can be narrative, it could be descriptive, it could be argumentative, where you are trying to put across a different argument. So, or it could be documentation. A lot of non-fiction writing is documentation. For example, when you write biographies or when you write memoirs, you are basically trying to document something or chronicle something. Okay? So what is the style of the book? Another important thing where you as a reader come in a nonfiction review is that whether you agree with the author or not. Whether you agree with what he is presenting in the book, or you disagree. And when you agree or disagree, you should also give why you disagree and why you agree. Then you should look at what is the usefulness of the book, usefulness of the contents of the book for the intended audience. So I'll keep coming back to this intended audience. Every book has an intended audience. It may reach out to a larger audience, but every book has a intended audience. Now, how well is that suited or useful for that audience is something that you need to assess, right? And talk about. So these are some of the elements. So if I go back, it's about the content, it's about the emotion, it's about language, it's about style, it's about purpose, and the overall impression the book leaves you with. So these are the basic elements that you can look for. And if you, even if you have a sentence each for each of them, you have a fairly good book review in place. Now I'll talk about how, what the book review should contain. Okay? So a book review today on e-commerce sites, you can write anywhere from 50 words to about uh, 200, 300 words, a small short review where you can potentially write about the first things that I talked about, that what is the impact that the book had on you. If you can restrict yourself to that, you're writing small short reviews, which you can put at sites like Amazon or Goodreads or something. Uh, if you're writing for a blog or for a print publication, then you can, I would say a good length is 800 to 1200 words, or 800 to 1000 words is a decent review. More than that, people don't read. More people don't want to read unless it's a book that you really feel needs to be evaluated in longer term. Some literary journals would ask you to write in about 3000 odd words, but this will also be for books which have some literary value or some long-term value. So if you want to write for, let's say, 800 to 1000 words, if you can write on a book that you have read, that's a great review. You can write about the book, you can write about the author, you can write about, you can give the basic information about the book, which is basically any ISBN number would give. Okay. Then you should write about anything that stands out. You know, in every book or in a lot of books, there is something that stands out. Now, some book may have a great cover design. So you can mention that, you know, if you really like the cover design, or if it's really bad, you know, either way, if it's really great or really bad, you can say this is. Let me share you. I just finished reading a brilliant book on women in science. You know, how science has treated women, and it's a great book. You know, it's something that not many authors have explored. It's something that, it's a subject that potentially in popular writing has never been written about. The book, it was difficult to hold. You know, it was one of those soft cover books which are somewhere between hardbound and paperback, and I literally had to tear the book apart to be able to read it. You know, so I had to tear it two or three times so that I can read the book. So this was exceptional. This doesn't happen every day. So if this is something like this, you should mention it, not to be critical of the book, but to let the publishers know. Sometimes they don't even know that such a problem exists. So anything that stands out, sometimes it could be the illustrations in the book, sometimes it could be the maps in the book, sometimes it could be pictures in the book, or sometimes sometimes people use different innovative things in the book. So anything that stands out or anything that you've not seen earlier is something that you can talk about. You can also talk about a little bit of author background, you know, so that you know where the author is coming from, you know. And it takes a lot of uh, effort to invest in yourself into understanding why the author is saying what the author is saying, you know. And so instead of just confronting the author and saying, you know, you say so because you are, you know, you belong to this group or that ideology or this, you literally tell the author that uh, you understand where the author is coming from. Okay? So, for example, I was recently reading an author who was born in 1930s. Uh, she's a leading historian and writer on history. But when I read a full book on her as an interview, I realized she's somebody who was born in early 1930s, who was in her teens when India got independence, and somebody who was completely shielded from that experience. You know, so she was somebody who, while she was a young adult in 1947 when the country went through partition, she was so shielded that she doesn't know that something happened in the country. She was in her hostel doing all the things girls of that age do. So, and then, after the partition, she continued to be in her school, college, education. She went, she belonged to that elite part of the society, which was absolutely shielded from whatever happened in the country. And unfortunately, she got to write the history, so we are getting impacted. But when you look at her upbringing, you understand that why she is the way she is. So sometimes this background check on the author gives you a lot of insight on why the person is saying what that person is saying. Okay. So some of the do nots, the kind of things you shouldn't do. You should not disclose the content of the book. You shouldn't write the summary of the book, and any surprises you shouldn't take away. Just leave that, give that respect to the author and the publisher, that you don't take away any surprises or any key things out of the book. Now, if you still have a problem writing reviews and you don't know where to start, there's one small little trick you can use. When you close the book and you say, imagine that your best friend calls and says, Acha, you finished reading this book, now tell me how it is. And whatever you will tell your friend, just put it in a language, put it right up, and that's the review. And if that doesn't work, go and read the reviews written by others of the same book, and that'll trigger a lot of thoughts. That'll give you a lot of ideas on what to write about. You'll read somewhere and say, no, I didn't feel like that. Oh yeah, I also felt the same. So that'll give you an impetus to write. Okay? So this is primarily what I wanted to talk about. Now I'll open it up to questions. If you have any questions.
All the participants, if you have questions, please raise hand or just go ahead, jump in, unmute your microphone, and feel free to ask any question. Otherwise, I'm going to jump the queue and chip in.
Sure.
Arya, Ashutosh, Shruti, Sridharanji, do any of you have any question for Anuradha ji? Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, may I, Dimple? May I ask her?
Sure, Sridharanji, please go ahead.
Hello. Thank you, Anuradha ji. Thank you to be telling us about her craft. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, sir.
Yeah, I mean, it's very rare to see the point of view of a book reviewer, at least it's for me. And thank you for explaining what goes into it. It's an enormous amount of work. May I ask you a little bit about the mundane aspects of it? Not mundane, quite really. The trade. How many books do you read, and how many do you put away every month? You seem to be a prodigious reader.
So I have reviewed about 600 plus books in last 13 years. Okay, and they are all out there in the public domain. If you go on the blog, you'll see it all. And so right now I read about 4 to 5 books in a month, and now I'm like pretty easy with reviews. So once I've read the book, it's not too difficult or time consuming for me to write the review. So yeah, 4 to 5 books.
Are you a reader who reads it line by line, or are you a skip reader?
No, I read from cover to cover. I read everything because I also understand now that I have a responsibility. People look up to me, so I have to be. I should be able to justify every word that I have written about the book. So I read every word of it.
Yeah, that's remarkable. I tend to plod through books, and here you are, extremely productive. And really, thank you for letting us in on the book reviewers' world and craft. Thank you.
Thank you for joining in.
Shruti, you had a question. Hello.
Hi, Shruti.
Hi, ma'am. Ma'am, how long should a book review be ideally?
So I spoke about it. So if you are writing for a blog or for a print publication, anywhere from 800 to 1000 words should be good. But it depends on how much have you impacted. Yeah, go ahead.
Ma'am, also like you were saying, it depends on my, supposing I'm an engineer. I mean, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
if I review an arts or culture book, it I won't be an expert, right? It's just my opinion of a book. So in that case, I mean, am I allowed to do a book review, ma'am? Or I mean, it's
Yes.
just my
Why
question.
not? You're telling your fellow engineers or people who are not trained in arts and craft what the book means for them, which is I mean, we are a lot of people on this planet. So even if you are telling it to a community of engineers that this is how an engineer reads an arts book, uh, that's it. You can do any any book review. I mean, it depends. Like I said in the beginning, it is the intersection of your experiences and author's experiences or knowledge. So so for example, let's say you don't know nothing about arts. Let's say you know nothing about Indian iconography and you end up reading a book, and it opens a window for you into the space of Indian art or art history, right? So now so you can say that if you read this book you will realize what a great what you know what whatever these things are and which we were never exposed to. And let me tell you, I come from an engineering background, and when I started reading art history books, they were a complete eye opener for me. In fact, if you see my initial reviews, I'm like in awe, and I'm saying, why did nobody teach this to me in school? Why did nobody expose me to this? So my reaction to those books was that, so and that reaction made many other people read those books and say, okay, if she has that reaction, maybe I'll also feel the same, or let me go and read this book and see what it means. So so yes, you can. And unless it's a very technical book on a subject which is only relevant to niche people, a niche category of people, leave a very small small window for that people. But general books, yes, you can. For example, I'll tell you, I refused a book. Somebody from It's a very funny incident that somebody from Europe wrote to me saying that they have a book on the evolution of Christianity, and they asked me to review it. And I told them that I'm not capable of reviewing this because I don't understand that, and I can't review because it was a book with a very high authority in their opinion. So they in fact came back to me saying that you've reviewed so many books on Hinduism, so why can't you review it on Christianity? So I had to explain them that this is a religion I'm born into and I understand, you know. So I can review books on this, but I don't understand at all. So I'll have to leave those very niche things that you don't understand at all and you have no intention of going there. Most general books, most trade books, as the industry calls it, you can read.
Thank you, ma'am. I had that question in my mind for a long time.
I hope it helped. Anybody else?
We have
I
someone
see
from
somebody.
iPhone. There's someone from the iPhone.
Yes,
Yeah.
you have a question?
Please unmute your mic.
Yeah, this is Omi here, Omendra Ratnu.
Namaste,
Hi.
Omid. Go ahead.
Um, I just wanted to know what we're talking about. I just joined in.
You joined in a little too late. We are done with this session. This was a session on book review.
Oh, sorry, boss. Okay then.
Not a problem. Anuradha ji just took us through her journey of books and reviews. She shared a lot of tips about how one could go about reviews. And the video of the chat will be made available, so probably you could look that up. And I'm sure Anuradha ji will be sharing her website details with us, so you could actually look up on the 600 plus reviews that she's done already.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good.
Arya ji, please go ahead. You have a question, Arya.
Yeah, ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. I'm a new writer, and as you have reviewed 600 plus books, I'm actually confused between the language. I want to write a book on different questions because I'm a pass out of actually I've done engineering at first, and then I have done social sciences from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. So when I was studying in this social sciences environment, I found certain things which they have asked to Hindus, and they were questioning on several things which were wrong. So I wrote those things point wise, and I have identified 10 points on it, and I want to write a book on it that answers of those questions. But I'm confused about the language, whether I would write it in Hindi or English, because I found that if we write something in Hindi, then there is a very less market of readers. So I want to know that whether it is good to write in Hindi or English, in which language I would choose.
I think I lost connection in between, so you'll have to repeat the question if there is some.
Yeah, I'm a new writer and I want to write a book, and
Okay.
I want to write a book on Hindus' perspective.
Okay.
Actually, there are a lot of questions which was raised by communist intellectuals, like on Sati, on Dalits, and like this, and Mahishasur and all. And
Communists cannot be intellectuals.
I have an alternative narrative on it. So I want to write on this. So I am confused whether I
First
would
of
write.
all, stop calling communists as intellectuals. They are crooks. So,
No, they are
communist
not.
crooks. So then don't refer to them as intellectuals. That is dignifying them. Treat them with the contempt that they deserve.
No,
Yeah.
I know, but
Please go on. Please go on.
yeah, I want to know whether Hindi books can also be become as popular as English books.
Actually, Hindi books are very popular.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
go in the Hindi, especially in the UP, Eastern UP area, Hindi reading is very, very high, and the quality of Hindi books is average quality of an Hindi trade book is far higher than the average quality of an English trade book. English books, especially those written by Indians, are highly simplified because most authors are not writing in their first language, so they tend to simplify a lot. Uh, so, so yeah, write in Hindi, and if need be, get it translated in English.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to ask a question? Charu, Ashutosh, Arya, do you wish to ask another question? I can see your hand raised.
Uh, no.
All right. Anuradha ji, I would like to ask a question. You spoke about non-fiction writing.
Right.
Any tips on if this is non-fiction, more on the lines of a personal journey? So, if somebody's recounting his or her own journey, how do you think? And I'm not asking from a reviewer's perspective; it's from a writer's perspective. What do you think would be the right approach towards the overall structure, which would actually attract or keep the reader engaged?
So, there are 2, 3 approaches you can take. The easiest approach is to do a chronological thing, which is start with your birth and start narrating what, as things happen. That's the easiest approach, easiest to write. The second is to pick up the highlight, the thing that you want to highlight, or any incident or any theme that you want to highlight. Begin with that and then build on the memoirs. So, and then of course you can choose either a linear narrative, or you can choose a narrative which is interspersed with, goes back and forth in time. It could be, and then you can choose your pegs, whether you are trying to peg your memoirs around people or around events or around, let's say, your things that you learned in life. So depends, you can choose these 3, 4 ways of writing a biography, autobiography, or a memoir.
All right. DV sir has a question. DVG, please go ahead.
Yeah, Anuradha, I'm back again with another question.
Please,
I
sir.
tend to enjoy book reviews as a genre by themselves. They are so well-written book reviews make you want to read a book. And they also tell you a lot about the story behind, and some of the book reviews in Observer and some of the magazines go to several pages. You don't even
Right,
realize that you're reading a book review. You get
right,
drawn into an entirely different world. I enjoy that long form kind of a book review.
right,
So quite a lot of the books that I have read are due to
right,
these long book reviews. So being
right.
a professional book reviewer, I would like to know how you select your books for reviewing. Where do you get triggered? How do
Okay,
you get
so
triggered to do a book?
okay, so I do have a long list of a wish list of books that I want to read. I
How do you
in
pick
my
them?
So I am telling you. So right now I get a list of new books from all possible publishers around the world, and
Oh,
I read the synopsis of those books, and whichever book I think I would like to read, I get them. So I and when the book comes, I flip through the few pages, look at here and there, and then do. And over a period of time, it's not very difficult to choose books. Sometimes you end up choosing wrong books, and the books are not as great as their PR material tells them to be. But then if you've read the author earlier, or you've read the books from a particular publisher, you know what to expect. You kind of know what to expect. But you also create space for experimenting with new authors. Sometimes first time young authors have really surprised me with their craft or with their techniques of storytelling. So I do create space for those kind of surprises. Sometimes they are good, sometimes they are bad, but unless you go out of the lead publisher book list, you will not discover new authors. So I also think that if I review a book of a self-published author who's good, I'm actually doing a service to the book reading community, or helping the author in my way. So
okay. A related question, if I may.
please,
Yeah.
Just
I
a
mean,
small reminder,
okay,
make short
what do you
time
do
for
if
the
you come across it? May I?
sorry, please.
Please go ahead, but we'll have to look at the
Yeah, yeah.
time because the call might snap anytime. So we have to be mindful of
Oh,
that.
oh, all right. No, if you come across a terrible book, sometimes
Right,
you throw it
right.
away or you write a review and pan it.
I write a review, but I write okay. So my parameter is very simple. See, every author has an audience, so that audience may not be me. So I might be
Mhm.
more knowledgeable than the author, or absolutely novice on the subject. But I have given only 3 bad reviews in my reviewing life, 3 terrible reviews, let's say. And these were authors uh, who were purposefully dishonest and unethical. And all the 3 times I had gone to the authors and asked them, "This is my understanding of your book. Please tell me if my understanding is wrong." And their reaction confirmed that they planned the book this way. They were trying to mislead the reader knowingly. Okay, so these are the 3 times when I have given the authors terrible, and I've written it as it is, saying that this is what my assessment of the book is, and this is what author's reaction was when I contacted them. So apart from that, I can say that there are bad authors in the sense who are not great writers, but then over a period of time, their readers, their audience will tell them that they are not great writers. Either they will improve or they will perish as authors. But dishonest authors is something that you really need to tell the world that these are dishonest authors, and they are being dishonest knowingly, purposefully, and they're trying to mislead.
Thank you. You're a very generous person. Yeah, thank you.
Uh, okay, so if any of you would like to write reviews for my blog, you're welcome to join in as an intern. I'll help you, guide you. Please come and write reviews. I have tons of books which are waiting to be reviewed.
Do we have any other question or any other question? I think we are done for the evening, Anuradha ji. Any closing comments?
No, thank you, Indic Book Club, and thank you, Dimple, for organizing this whole talk. And I hope it reaches out to a little more people, and so that more people read more books. It's a wonderful thing to do. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak.
It's been our pleasure, and thank you all participants. Just wanted to remind you that Indic Chat is a weekly feature every Sunday at 7 p.m. Do remember to follow our social media handles on Twitter, Facebook. We have our website too, www.indicbookclub.com. Do bookmark it and keep following Anuradha ji for her amazing work. Thank you, everybody. Namaskar.
Namaskar.